Photoshop CS6 makes it really easy to work with paragraph text in a way that you never really could before in Photoshop. Now you still may want to use a product like InDesign for doing some text-heavy documents, but it's nice to know that you can put all that together in Photoshop and do a lot of the work right there. So let's explore what we can do here in Photoshop CS6. We're going to start by exploring some options for working with paragraph text, and I'm going to use my type tool and just go ahead and reset the tool. In fact, I'll reset all of them, and that way any of the formats that I might have picked up are going to be changed around a little bit. Oh, looked like since I had something selected, it got changed, but that's okay. I'm going to go here to my selection tool, and let's just make sure no text is selected. We'll go ahead and reset all the tools again. There we go. It's going to reset everything. Looks good. And normally when I create text, I simply click, and that allows me to create a line of text. But if I click and drag, I'm going to create an ability to add some paragraph text. Now, one of the things that I can do is I can go into type, and I can actually just paste lorem ipsum. And this is a nice placeholder text. It's text that doesn't really mean anything. It's just a way where I can see that how it's flowing, and I can make some changes to it. I can also go up to my type menu here, and I have some panels, and I can work more closely with character and paragraph settings as well as create styles. So let's take a closer look here at the character panel. It's very similar to what we saw before with the fonts and the font size. We're making some of those quick changes, but I can also add things like kerning and tracking. This changes the space. I'm going to go ahead and highlight my text. And it can change things like the spacing between the text, make it more opened or more closed. I'll go ahead and reset it back. I can also stretch items out. This can be really handy. Let's switch over here to the World Class Travels. This could be really handy if I wanted to work on a title, for example. And I can make them a little higher. So let's say 125. Or I could squish them down a little bit. How about 75%? And you can see how it's changing the height, but not necessarily the entire font size. You also have some options for working with the baseline shift. So if I want to pull some text up or down, for example, pull it up a little bit or pull it down. This would actually really help if you had something like a trademark symbol and you're trying to create that effect. You can notice there's some other tools, and depending on your font, you'll even have some of these special tools for making changes. But I could do something like a small cap feature, or here's a way to do a baseline shift and also resize something. So if I add some trademark symbol, and I could use a superscript to change that. So you got some nice options. They're all built in. Now the character is right next door, and these are things that affect the entire paragraph, not just one item. I'm going to go ahead and press enter, or backspace rather, and instead of pressing enter, I'm going to use a shift enter. That means that this is going to be on one paragraph, not two paragraphs. And I can center it or right align it. It's starting to move a little bit, so if I position my mouse just below the text, I can actually realign it. If I put it up in the top, I get that type tool, but just below it, I get that move tool. I can also change things like the spacing. So if I wanted to change some paragraph spacing, which would be handy if I had a lot of paragraphs, or even remove the hyphenation. Let's go back to the other option in here and highlight all that text. And we could remove the hyphenation. You'll see there are some hyphens right there. Go ahead and remove it. Could change it to a type of justification. Different kinds of justification options in there. It really depends on how it's going to stretch out that last line. And if I end up having a couple of hard returns in there, I'll go ahead and select everything, Control-A to select it all. I could actually use some spacing. I could type it in. I also have what's called a scrubby slider in there, and I could just pull that out. And this is the spacing between paragraphs. So what you're noticing is where I pressed enter, I'm changing that space, and you can do a space before or a space after. There's a little visual here. If you're familiar with InDesign or Illustrator, it's using the same concepts and some of the same visuals that are used in those products that are working with text. And this idea of character and paragraph are consistent with all word processing systems. So if you're using Word or WordPerfect or some other product, you'll notice that a lot of these same tools of alignment and spacing are available in those products as well. So I've come back here and I can make some changes and select thing, maybe change some of the alignment as well. And I got a really interesting effect. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete all that, but I still have this area, this placeholder, and instead of putting in some lorem ipsum, I'm going to put in my regular text, and I'm going to go ahead and select it all and copy it right here from Word and just go ahead and paste it in. Just Control V or paste. Looks really nice. I'm going to actually make a few other changes in here because it's pulling in some of the formatting that was already around. And besides formatting it as you see, you can also create styles. And a style is a way to save these formats. I'm going to go ahead and go to my Paragraph Styles panel. And let's create a brand new style. Just click on that and then double click to create a new style. It's pulling in some of the formatting of what my text was selected. I'm going to change this here. Let's use Garamond. And there's actually with the G's, I got to find, it's alphabetized, there we go. And we're going to find that one. And Adobe Garamond Pro, I like the fonts with the word Pro in them. They tend to have a few extra features. And we can go down a little bit, like 11 points. In fact, you know what we could do, just to make it a little bit, fit a little nicer, we can actually put in a decimal point. You don't have to have exactly 10 point or 11 point. You could do a 10.5 if you wanted to. And we're deciding that as we're going through these different options in here, we can explore what we want to have as availability. And let's change our before and after, and we'll do something where it's before, it'll be 6 points. And that's about a half a line. Consider like 12 points is about the common line for 6 picas. And I can just press tab and actually it'll put in the 6 points for me. It knows that it's a point measurement. I'll come down to hyphenation, and with hyphenation I'll make sure that it's not allowed, so it's unchecked, so no hyphenation allowed. And for justification, I'll actually go back here to some of the different options. That was a little bit more advanced justification I wanted. Yeah, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to call this body text. Click on OK. And now I'm going to highlight all of this text. I did a Control A because there might have even been some stuff that was not covered. I'm just going to click on the body text and it automatically applies it for me. The plus tells me though that there are some overrides and there could be some elements that aren't completely complying. And so if I go ahead and clear the overrides, it resets it. So now it's completely consistent. I'm going to go ahead and make another style for these bulleted items, get rid of some of that spacing. Now what I could do is I could simply change the formatting just by going to the paragraph. But if I use another style, it gives me a little bit of control when I want to change it later. So go create the style, double click on it, and I'll call this bulleted list. And I'm going to keep pretty much all the same formatting. Because my text was selected, it's remembering the formatting, so it's using this style by example. We're just going to go here to indents and spacing, excuse me. And I'm just going to remove this and maybe keep a little bit of spacing afterwards, but we'll move it to 3 points. We'll click on OK. And we'll just make sure that those are applied, the bulleted list. And notice that wherever I click, I can see that style that's selected. And that's a really nice way to save and work with those styles. I could also, if I click on the flyout menu here, I can load styles, which means that if I had another document and I were to load paragraph styles, I could pull in styles that might exist in any of these different Photoshop elements. So if I were creating several of these flyers, then I have some ability to reuse those styles over and over again. I'm going to make sure that nothing's selected at this time. So I have to be careful about what layer is active. So none of my type layers are active. And then I could go in and double click on body text and change the color. So for example, if I want to use that dark blue, and maybe even bump it up, make it a little bit brighter blue, click on OK. And again, I'm changing the text here for body text. And you can see how it's updating the color automatically because they're all based on that particular style. And that's really the trend that we use with styles. Now, Photoshop uses what are called paragraph text, and it uses point text. And let's go ahead to this World Class Travels here, and I've got that active, and if I click on my type menu, I could convert this to paragraph text. Let's get the move tool, move it back in, and now it's going to act like a paragraph as opposed to a point. And when I go back to my type tool and I click on it, I can see the bounding box, and it's acting like a box. That bottom corner allows me to resize the box if things didn't fit or if I wanted to reposition it. If I use, there you go, and if I were to use the options on the side, it's actually changing some of that as well for me. Get some ideas of how that's going. So I'm just creating that nice big space to fit everything. And if we switch to the other layer, we can see that that's also using a paragraph style. Let's go ahead and select on that bottom corner, and we can position our text, and everything reflows beautifully. Now, in addition to paragraph style, let's go back here. We also have that point text. So I could take this World Class Travel and revert it back to a, there you go, point text. There you go. And when I click on it, you can see instead of a box, we've got these lines, these paths. And what that means that if I start to move things, it's going to actually, or excuse me, if I start to resize things, it's going to stretch it out and do a little bit more conversions as well. All right, well, now it's time for a pop quiz. What kind of text does Photoshop CS6 allow you to convert point text? A, lorem ipsum text. B, vertical text. C, paragraph text. D, text on a path. The answer is C, paragraph text. Well, now you've had a chance to see some of the new and improved features of working with paragraph text in Photoshop, and you can take your images and start enhancing them with different types of graphical designs.